what, you might ask? For the strange, the anomalous, the thought-provoking. That was my chair screeching. My apologies. And why do we do this? What's the point? The point is that we believe that a lot of what we think our history was like is in fact not so at all. What we learn in school is rudimentary true. I think that there's another certain truth to it. Last 5,000 years, fairly accurate, but it's not really giving us any good insight or detail. But after that, beyond that, no idea. We think there was a Stone Age, an old Stone Age, Paleolithic, Neolithic, New Stone Age. We made tools, and then we had cave paintings 20,000 years ago, and then we built the pyramids. Like the song says, and I think it's Big Bang Theory.
So convenient, Mickey.
It does, doesn't it? It's a linear progression. That's what everybody believes.
Anything. Or enough.
No,
when
it
you
doesn't.
Look at everything else, yeah.
No, but when I was a child, people believed that the human beings, or Homo sapiens sapiens, what we are, the thinking man.
The thinking man's man.
The thinking man had been around for about 100,000 years. That was about the number when I was a child. Now we're looking at 300,000 years, 400,000. So it's been pushed further and further into the past. And we also believe that Neanderthal was an ancestor, et cetera, et cetera. Not so. Neanderthal, Denisovan man. Yeah, they're all parallels, right? They're all the same species. So we interbred with these people because there's still some genetic material left here with us, right? So they have to be the same species. Otherwise, the thing is this. So horses and donkeys can create offspring, right? But it's called a mule, except the mule is sterile.
It can't reproduce.
Right? Cannot reproduce, whereas here, clearly not the case, because we're going at it like rabbits, right? And we are overpopulating the world. and we still have several traces of other species, or not other species, other branches of Homo sapiens within us. Okay, we do. But just imagine, you might think, the human race is so varied, we all look so different, Now imagine, because we're all 99.9% the same, right? Pretty much. Imagine a world where we weren't, and the differences are in the percentage ranges, right? So 90, 99, 98% similar. Imagine how many different people there could have been. Blue skin is a real thing.
Chimps, right?
Yeah, 98 is chimps, exactly.
Yeah.
They were blue. So blue skin is a real thing. There's people that have blue skin. It's a disorder they call it, but it's definitely something that happens.
In fact, Mackie.
Yep, correct. Could be the blonde hair and blue eyes that we are associating with the Scandinavians. That is a genetic mutation, a flaw, if you will. That was fairly recent.
That's being bred out of our civilization.
Yeah, quite interestingly as well. Yeah, so we are living in a world that is extremely homogeneous. Okay, from as far as Homo sapiens is concerned. But what if it was different, Dave? What if the human race didn't pop out 300,000 years ago and, then developed and for 300,000 years we just scratched in the dirt and made some stone tools, and then, about 10,000 years ago we decided, hey, let's build cities. And then 5,000 years ago, hey, civilization is a good idea. And then, off we go, right? But for 300,000 years we said, we're just going to sit around scratching in the dirt. Doesn't sound like a thing to me, but
good times,
even if the human race,
good times,
my friend, good times. Let's smoke that. Let's smoke those berries. See what happens. But see, this is the thing, right? And even if we take the approach and say, okay, the human race, as we know it, is 300,000 years old. That's what we say. Like right now, the way you are, your physical makeup, et cetera, that's 300,000 years old. They say.
Yeah.
If that were true, right? Let's go with that for a second. Then we would have had, in assuming that it would have taken us 20,000 years to get from nothing, right, zero, to where we are, right? We could have built a civilization like this 15 times over.
That's right.
Let me say that again.
Say every 2,000 years.
Yeah, 15 times over. 15 times. Boop, 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 boop. So the legends of Atlantis, Lemurian, Mu, and the Aboriginal Dreamtime, the world cycles of the Maya, and as well as the Indian or the Hindu Vedic tradition, all of a sudden. And the king lists of the Egyptians and Sumerians, Babylonians going back hundreds of thousands of years, all of a sudden that thing doesn't become so crazy.
But hang on, I'm the armchair critic, Mickey, for the first time in my entire life. Where's all the evidence?
Where is all the evidence? Thank you, sir. What a segue. You're the segue king, my friend. Now, the evidence, we've for the last few weeks, we've shared some of that evidence with you. We had a show cycle around technologies that existed well before ours that have survived to this day. We talked about stone artifacts, and et cetera, because those are the ones that last, Dave. Stones will last. If something is built from glass and wood, and metal, not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much.
Unless it's that post in India that's still there.
That's right, the iron post. Very, very, very good. Comes in New Delhi, in fact, it stands, right? And still, why doesn't it rust? What's rust rather?
Well, that's a good question.
That's a good question. Good question. They move to the top of the class.
It doesn't oxidize. Yeah, it's a crazy.
It doesn't oxidize. Yeah. So we shared with you physical evidence, or artifacts, sites, buildings, books, but even technologies. I mean, one of my favorites, Dave, I have to say, is the cup that changes color depending on the liquid you pour into it.
Yeah.
Blew my mind completely. Right? Nanotech at work.
Poison.
Yeah, clearly that's probably what his main purpose was, I guess, right? But think about that. Oh no, that's just a coincidence.
Oh, sure it
yeah, just
happenstance.
Yeah, we can't do that today. We can't do it. Can't be done. No. We can't do it, right? And other things we can't do. But so these are things that you can go and touch, right? But they're built and whatever, and very hard to date. Very, very hard to date. Very difficult to date. Now though, with this show cycle, we've looked at physical biological evidence of that's anomalous, right? It's just strange. We shared some of the things, the Star Child skull we shared with you, we shared the Atamaka skeleton we shared with you, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. It's just strange stuff, but it's there. You can touch it. Okay, I don't care how many people try to debunk it. Okay, the original mysteries are still there. Answer it. Okay, but don't give me the grub of saying, oh, no, clearly you don't understand science, you don't understand this. No, I understand a lot, trust me. You might not think so, but I understand quite a bit. And now we are going into a field of study where most of the artifacts are no longer in existence. So the heyday of mining, I guess, large-scale mining certainly, was in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th century. That's when our civilization became industrial, and we started digging up iron and coal in enormous quantities because we needed it to feed the factories, the engines that drove our industrial revolution. That's just what happened. It's a knock-on effect. There was mining before that, absolutely, but never at that scale from a global point of view, right? I mean, the English, the Germans, everybody was mining like nuts. The Americans, there was mining everywhere, and it was mining that was done by people. So there were not massive machines digging into the mountain, There were people with pickaxes and shovels going underground and starting to dig, right? That's what happened. So in that time, and people always ask, why did they find it then, right? Why not before? They might have found it before, right? But they might have got lost in time. This is still recent enough, a couple hundred years ago, where we have some knowledge of what was found. And then why haven't they found anything since, Mackie? That's why, there's more mining going on now than ever before. That is very true. You're 100% correct. There is, but it's very different. It's completely industrialized.
Machines to grind everything up. We're never going to identify anything that we discover again because it'll be ground up. And Mackie, to be honest, where would the smartest place to do an archaeological dig be?
Nowhere where we're in right now.
That's right. So if you lower the sea by 30 meters or 30 yards, you're more likely to find the remnants of the ancient cities at those riversides than you are up on the mountains where we live right now, comparatively.
Completely.
So we're looking in the wrong places.
Yeah, and most of the what does
bubble up to the top, like Göbekli Tepe, is a complete surprise. Like, what on earth?
Where'd that come from?
Where does that fit? I can't imagine how difficult that would be to try and if I was a lockstep anthropologist attempting to fit it into our timeline.
It doesn't.
That's right. It doesn't. It's older. It predates everything else. So, where on earth it's all too hard. I'll just put that in the too hard basket and leave it over there.
It was religious. If in doubt, it was always religious. And this is really the problem, right, that we're having here. Because nobody's honest enough, intellectually honest enough to really look at it and entertain the crazy. This is interesting because I need to say this. A lot of the amazing finds have been made by amateurs. Okay, Schliemann was an amateur. The guy digging into his field that found Göbekli Tepe was a farmer just trying to clear log, right? These are people that did these coincidences, building sites. If you're digging for tunnels or digging for parking lots, right? They find things. and they shut it down, right? So even see mine sites, if there are mine sites still that have people in it, then they can find things as well. But for the most part, it's complete crapshoot. We don't know where anything is. Now what we do find are remnants of civilization we know existed, like the Romans and the Greeks and the Sumerians and Babylonians. We know where to dig for that because we know where they were.
Yeah.
We know exactly where they were, right? And they were within a geological frame that makes sense because that area hasn't changed in the last 5,000 years, 10,000 years. Not that much. Not that much. It's still the same kind of stuff. But we're talking about things that are 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, maybe 500,000 years old, maybe older, right? And all of a sudden, everything changes because the world doesn't look as it did then today. Like they've said, water levels rise and fall. Simple example. They find frozen mammoths in Siberia in the permafrost, right? Like completely preserved. And they have buttercups in their mouth, which means they were grazing on buttercups.
That's right.
There's not a single buttercup that grows today in Siberia. Okay? It's a very different landscape. Let's be very clear that these catastrophes have happened and snap frozen thousands, tens of thousands, millions of animals.
It wasn't a gradual freeze because they would have migrated to where it was more comfortable.
Yeah. And the buttercup would not be in the mouth still, right? So let's be very clear. It was snap frozen. So it's really disingenuous of people to say, "I don't know, you're all crazy, conspiracy this, conspiracy that." But we have to be honest here. There's evidence out there that doesn't make sense. And what we're going to discuss today comes from a great book, The Hidden History of the Human Race, Michael Cremo. And we shared with you last week what everybody else thinks. So it's Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson really who wrote Forbidden Archaeology. It's a long book, very dry. Read it if you want the information. There's a lot of data in there, and that's actually the funny thing is the criticism. The criticism is that there's too much data. It's trying to distract
criticism.
There's too much data. You're trying to distract us from the fact that you're creationists. Even albeit creationists we haven't seen before. You're the kind of creationist we're not comfortable with because we don't know really how to combat you yet. And I find that really sad in many ways. And I don't really care what someone's agenda is too much. I mean, I know what the agenda is. I know what people are trying to do. And I'll be honest with you, I think there's a lot more truth in what the Vedic teachings are, the Hindu teachings and the ancient cycles of life. The Mayas talked about the other worlds as well, than our modern science. We completely dismiss all of that. But we're coming back to it. We find, hey, acupuncture works. Hey, Vedic medicine works. Hey, Vedic math works. You know, Vedic math. I saw a demonstration of Vedic math at a conference I attended. I think it was the Nexus conference. This blew me away completely.
Really?
But yeah, absolutely. The point is that we are dealing with things here that reflect our ignorance. Okay, but we can't be ignorant because we've got too much vested our status, our career, our money, our hubris. We are overly proud in our achievements, but it's not linear. Anything in nature, if you just have to study nature, look at nature. Is there any linear process ever? No. It's all cyclical. They're called the cycles of life. Oh, that's what you call it. That's okay. It's the same with our history. Empires start, they rise, and then eventually they will fall. Our civilization that we have today is not static. No. Eventually, someone is going to stand in the ruins of our cities and think, "Oh, I wonder what happened here." So this is just a preamble, Dave. But look. The hidden history of the human race, and I have to say here, right? I think a lot of these artifacts might have been sequestered away. They might very well be sitting in warehouses, a la Indiana Jones, massive warehouses and crates. We'll never see the light of day. Could be the Smithsonian, could be the Vatican Library, could be who knows who's got what. But they did exist, I believe, because people they photographed it. There's newspaper evidence. People talked about it. They discussed it. If it didn't exist, then they couldn't have discussed it, right? And the contention is because they didn't have radiocarbon dating then, and we don't have the artifact anymore to do it, right? But you could do it because they're physical, biological artifacts. You can radiocarbon date them, and maybe that's why they're not longer visible to us.
Yeah, they're not present. Right?
Yeah. So, but they were, and they were found in strata of the Earth where they shouldn't have been there. They simply shouldn't have been there. Right, Dave? But what can you tell us about anomalous human skeletal remains?
Yeah, in the 19th and early 20th centuries, scientists found numerous stone implements and other artifacts in extremely old formations. They are They also discovered modern human skeletal remains in similarly ancient geological contexts. Although the human bones originally attracted considerable attention, they are now practically unknown. Most current literature gives one the impression that after the discovery of the first Neanderthal in the 1850s, no significant skeletal finds were made until the discovery of Java Man in the 1890s, so 40 years. Trenton femur, on December 1st, 1899, Ernest Volk, a collector working for the Peabody Museum, set the Wayback Machine, Peabody Museum of American Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University, discovered a human femur in a fresh railroad cut south of Hancock Avenue within the city limits of Trenton, New Jersey. The femur was found lying on a small ledge 91 inches beneath the surface. Volk stated, and it's a quote, "About 4 inches over or above the bone was a place about the length of a bone where it evidently had fallen out of." The human femur was photographed by Volk, who declared that the overlaying strata immediately above and for some distance on either side of the find were undisturbed. Volk said that the femur was thoroughly fossilized. 2 human skull fragments were taken from the same layer that yielded the femur. In a letter dated the 30th of July 1987, Ron Witt of New Jersey Geological Survey told us that the stratum containing the Trenton femur and skull fragments is from the Sangamon interglacial and is about 107,000 years old. According to standard ideas, human beings of modern type arose in South Africa about 100,000 years ago and migrated to America at most 30,000 years ago. So there's a pretty significant gap of 7,000 years.
What's 70,000 years among friends?
Who cares?
But the point, this is here right now, as the first item. Number 1, Ernest Volk worked for the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard. Number one. So he was. This is actually a trained professional, right? That's his job.
Yep.
He's not a miner. He's not this. He photographed it. Okay, in situ. He also then said there's clearly a place where it had fallen out because there was like an indentation in the rock that would have fit it, but it fell out. Okay, and now we learn that this stratum is 7,000 years, 100,000 years old, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in and of itself, considering that now we think the human race goes back even further, 300,000 years ago, right? That wouldn't be such a horrible thing. But the problem is, of course, it was found in America. And America, the standard model says, human beings didn't get here until about 30,000 years ago. So how then, in my esteemed colleagues' words, such a small gap of 70,000 years, how do you explain that? And by the way, this is how Elizabeth Steen McIntyre lost her job, by proposing that something like this is possible. Now, clearly, human beings were in the Americas. Clearly. Yeah. I mean, this is a guy from Harvard found a freaking bone, which is a human leg bone and a couple of skull fragments, right? Human femur. He didn't say Neanderthal femur or Anthropolithecus femur or anything like that. He didn't say that. Right. He said human femur.
So Meki, because it doesn't fit the current narrative about humans eating all of the mammoths as they traversed the country and built it out with populace, that having humans already there at 107,000 years ago, happily living with mammoths, not eating them all, that doesn't make any sense to anybody. Nope. So, I've got my arms crossed, and that's it. I can't even accept that it's real, but it's there. There it is. It's undeniable. It was found. It's been dated.
Been photographed.
Photographed. Yeah. That's where it
By
was.
a professional.
Done.
Share with our listeners the next, because the next bit is really important.
Oh, would you like me to share it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. This is for you.
So, the anomalous human skeletal remains. On December 7th, 1899, Volk returned to the railway cut about 24 feet west of the spot where he had found the fossilized femur. And in the same layer, Volk recovered 2 fragments of a human skull. The strata immediately overhead and for some distance on either side was said to be undisturbed.
Very important. Very important.
Because that's part. Yeah, that's part of the. You'll need that to defend where it comes up later. Could the human bones have worked their way down from the upper layers? Asked Volk. Pointed out that the upper layers were red and yellow, but the human bones were white and chalky, consistent with the white sand layer in which they were found. Because the Trenton femur was like that of modern humans, Alice, I can't even pronounce it. I nearly got it.
I know.
Of the Smithsonian Institution, thought it must be of a recent age. See, this is just, it can't be old if it looks new. Because you couldn't find something like that there. He expected that a genuinely ancient human femur should display primitive features. That same unpronounceable word, therefore said that the Trenton femur, and it's a quote, the antiquity of this specimen must rest on their geological evidence alone, unquote. But he was unable to point out anything wrong with their geological evidence.
And that's the point. That is the point. So this is similar to what was said about the Sphinx. Yeah. So here we have something that is in its own right. Here it is. Mm-hmm. It's presenting a whole variety of evidence, Dave. Mm-hmm. And now Heuritka said, yeah, well, clearly we must just trust geology here. Okay.
I don't even know what you were saying.
So show me what the problem with the geology is.
Yeah. Oh, there wasn't any.
I can't. Mm-hmm. So therefore, the evidence I've provided is conclusive.
That's right.
It can't be, because
it's too old.
It doesn't make sense to me, right? That's what he's saying. Well, it doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. It doesn't have to make sense to you, Mr. Heuritka. It doesn't. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone.
That's right.
At all. Quantum physics doesn't make sense to a single soul on the planet, but it's there. There it is. Yeah. Quantum physics is a real thing. So is this femur that was found in the strata by a Harvard luminary.
Parallel.
Right?
So during the 19th century and early 20th century, several discoveries of human skeletal remains were made in Middle Pleistocene formations in Europe. These discoveries include those made at Galley Hill, Moulin, Quignol, Cliché, La Denise, and Ipswich. Sorry, I kept going.
Switch.
Kept going with the French accent. Doubts remains as to the true age of these bones. We have nevertheless included them in our discussion for the sake of completeness. The presence of these skeletons in Middle Pleistocene strata could be attributed to recent intrusive burial, mistakes in reporting, or fraud. Nonetheless, there are reasons for thinking that the skeletons might in fact be of Middle Pleistocene age. We shall now briefly review some of the more noteworthy cases.
Just a point of order here. The authors here, right? And this is Cremo and Thompson, of course. They're not ramming this down your throat. They're saying, yeah, look, of course it could be intrusive burial, could be mistakes in reporting or fraud, but for completeness sake, we're going to include these because they may not be.
Let's have.
So they're not going, oh, this is what it is, because a Darwinian evolutionist would tell you, no, this is what it is, and if it's this whale once was a butterfly, so shut up. So these are the Galley Hill skeletons, or rather the Galley Hill skeleton. In 1888, workmen removing deposits Galley Hill near London, England, exposed a bed of chalk. The overlying layers of sand, loam, and gravel were about 10 or 11 feet thick. One workman, Jack Alsop, informed Robert Elliot, a collector of prehistoric items, so maybe a layman, but certainly someone with some expertise, that he had discovered a human skeleton firmly embedded in these deposits about 8 feet below the surface and about 2 feet above the chalk bed. Alsop had removed the skull but left the rest of the skeleton in place. Elliot stated that he saw the skeleton firmly embedded in the stratum. We carefully looked for any signs of the section being disturbed, but failed, the stratification being unbroken. Elliot then removed the skeleton and navigated to E.T. Newton, who published a report granting it grade H. A schoolmaster named M.H. Hayes observed the bones in the apparently undisturbed deposits before Elliot removed the skeleton. Hayes also saw the skull just after it was exposed by a workman excavating the deposits. Hayes said about the bones, no doubt could possibly arise to the observation of an ordinary intelligent person of their deposition contemporaneously with that of the gravel. This undisturbed state of the stratum was so palpable to the workman that he said, the man or animal was not buried by anybody. Numerous stone tools were also recovered from the Galley Hill site. According to modern opinion, the Galley Hill site would date to the Holstein Interglacial, which occurred about 330,000 years ago.
Wow.
Anatomically, the Galley Hill skeleton was judged to be of modern human type. 330,000, modern human type. Most scientists now think that anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, originated in Africa around 100,000 years ago. But again, as we spoke about earlier, guys and girls, that date is being pushed further and further back by official and orthodox science. They say, back to the text, that Homo sapiens sapiens eventually entered Europe in the form of Cro-Magnon, man, approximately 30,000 years ago, replacing the Neanderthals. Interestingly enough, so Africa 100,000 years ago, and then both Europe and America 30,000 years ago that we started populating those two regions and replacing Neanderthal. We now know that's not true. We know we didn't replace Neanderthal. We know we bred Neanderthal out, is what happened.
That's right.
Just what do modern paleoanthropologists say about the Galley Hill skeleton? Despite the stratigraphic evidence reported by Hayes and Elliot, K.P. Oakley and M.F.A. Montague concluded in 1949 that the skeleton must have been recently buried in the Middle Pleistocene deposits. They considered the bones, which were not fossilized, to be only a few thousand years old. This is also the opinion of almost all anthropologists today. The Galley Hill bones had a nitrogen content similar to that of fairly recent bones from other sites in England. Nitrogen is one of the constituent elements of protein, which normally decays with the passage of time. But there are many recorded cases of proteins being preserved in fossils for millions of years. Because the degree of nitrogen preservation may vary from site to site, one cannot say for certain that the relatively high nitrogen content of the Galley Hill bones means they are recent. The Galley Hill bones were found in loam, a clayey sediment known to preserve protein. Oakley and Montague found the Galley Hill human bones had a fluorine content similar to that of late Pleistocene and Holocene recent bones from other sites. It is known that bones absorb fluorine from groundwater, but the fluorine content of groundwater may vary widely from place to place, and this makes comparison of fluorine contents of bones from different sites an unreliable indicator of the relative ages. Later, the British Museum Research Laboratory obtained a carbon-14 date of 3,310 years for the Galley Hill skeleton, but this test was performed using methods now considered unreliable. Also, it is highly probable that the Galley Hill bones, kept in the museum for 80 years, were contaminated with recent carbon, causing the test to give a false young date. That's why you have to read a carbon date immediately before anyone can contaminate it. That's unfortunate. In attempting to discredit the testimony of Elliot and Hayes, who said no signs of burial were evident at Galley Hill, Oakley and Montague offered several arguments in addition to their chemical and radiometric tests. For example, Oakley and Montague argued that the relatively complete nature of the Galley Hill skeleton was a sure sign that it was deliberately buried. In fact, almost all of the ribs, the backbone, the forearms, hands, and feet were missing. In the case of Lucy, the most famous specimen of Australopithecus afarensis, most of the skeleton was preserved, and none has yet suggested that Australopithecines buried their dead. Scientists have also discovered fairly complete skeleton remains of Homo erectus and Homo habilis individuals. These cases, as all paleoanthropologists would agree, definitely do not involve deliberate burial. It is thus possible for relatively complete hominid skeletons to be preserved apart from burial. But even if the Galley skeleton was a burial, the burial may not have been recent. Sir Arthur Key suggested in 1928, weighing all the evidence, we are forced to the conclusion that the Galley Hill skeleton represents a man buried when the lower gravel formed a land surface. As can be seen, all bones point beyond themselves quite obliquely to events in the remote and inaccessible past. Controversy about their age is almost certain to arise, and in many cases the available evidence is insufficient to allow disputes to be definitively settled. This would appear to be true of Galley Hill. The report of Oakley and Montague cast doubt on the testimony of Elliot and Hayes. At the same time, the testimony of Elliot and Hayes cast doubt on the report of Oakley and Montague.
Yeah, they agree to disagree, Becky. That's what it appears to me.
That's what it is.
Okay, so Moulin Quignon jaw. This is the jawbone. In 1863, J. Boucher de Perthes, that'll do, discovered an anatomically modern human jaw in the Moulin Quignon pit in Abbeville, France. He removed it from a layer of black sand and gravel that also contained some stone implements of the Acheulean type. The black layer was 16.5 feet below the surface of the pit. The Acheulean sites at Abbeville are of the same age of the Holstein interglacial and would thus be about 330,000 years old. Upon hearing of the discovery, the Abbeville jaw and tools, a group of distinguished British geologists visited Abbeville, where at first favourably impressed. Later, however, it was alleged that some of the stone implements in Boucher de Perthes' collection were forgeries foisted on him by workmen. The British scientists then began to doubt the authenticity of the jaw. Taking a tooth found with the jaw back to England, they cut it open and were surprised at how well preserved it appeared. This enhanced their doubt, but many physical anthropologists have noted that fossil teeth of great age are often well preserved. Also, the Moulin Quignon jaw had a colouring which was found to be superficial and was easily scrubbed from one of the portions of bone. Some took this to be an indication of a forgery, but British anthropologist Sir Arthur Keith later said, "This feature of the jaw does not invalidate its authenticity." In May 1863, British geologists met with their French counterparts in Paris to decide the status of the jaw. The commission jointly declared in favour of the authenticity of the jaw, despite some reservations by two of the British members. Therefore, however, the British members continued to oppose the Moulin Quignon jaw and eventually won most scientists over to their side. That's in opposition. French anthropologists, said Keith, continued to believe in the authenticity of the jaw until between 1880 and 1890, when they ceased to include it in their list of discoveries of ancient man. At the present time, opinion is almost unanimous in the regarding of the Moulin Quignon jaw as a worthless relic. We see that its relegation to oblivion begins when the belief became fixed that Neanderthal man represented a Pleistocene phase in the evolution of modern races. That opinion, we have seen, is no longer tenable. In other words, scientists who believed that Neanderthals were immediate ancestors of Homo sapiens could not accommodate the Moulin Quignon jaw because it would have meant that anatomically modern human beings were in existence before Neanderthals. Today, the idea that Neanderthal were the direct ancestors of modern humans type is out of vogue, but this in itself does not clear the way for acceptance of the Abbeville jaw, which, if genuine, would be over 300,000 years old. From the information we now have at our disposal, it is difficult to form a definitive opinion about the authenticity of the Moulin-Quignon jaw, even if we accept that the jaw and the many flint implements found along with it were fakes. What does this tell us about the nature of paleoanthropological evidence? As we shall see, the Moulin-Quignon jaw and tools, if they were forgeries, are not alone. Piltdown Man, as in chapter 9, was accepted for 40 years before being dismissed as an elaborate hoax. Meki, you can take the update and go ahead. In your own time. Nope.
If only I unmuted. The Moulin-Quignon update. The authors recently uncovered new information that gives them a better impression of the Moulin-Quignon jaw. In the aftermath of the Moulin-Quignon debate, Boucher de Perthes continued to maintain that his discoveries were genuine. To help prove this, he conducted several more excavations at Moulin-Quignon, under very strict controls and in the presence of trained scientific observers. These excavations yielded many more anatomically modern human bones, bone fragments, and teeth. These discoveries, which received almost no attention in the English-speaking world, are significant demonstrations of human presence in the Middle Pleistocene of Europe, over 300,000 years ago. They also tend to strengthen the case for the authenticity of the original Moulin-Quignon jaw. These important discoveries, here mentioned only briefly, will be a subject of a future book by Michael Cremo. So, interestingly enough, in the Anglophone world, these discoveries, or the revisit of the site by Boucher de Perthes, was completely ignored, right? Because it didn't fit the picture. So thank you very much. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Which is why I'm glad I'm not. I've got several languages at my disposal, because sometimes I read something in German. Or even in Dutch, or sometimes I can puzzle out Norwegian or any of the Scandinavian languages, and there's a lot more information there than you would just find in an Anglophone book. Which brings us to the Clichy skeleton. In 1868, Eugene Bertrand reported to the Anthropological Society of Paris, Eugene Bertrand, that he found parts of a human skull along with the femur, tibia, and some foot bones in a quarry on the Avenue de Clichy. The bones were found 5.25 meters, it's about 17 feet, beneath the surface. Sir Arthur Keith believed the layer in which Clichy human bones were found was the same age as the one in which the Galley Hill skeleton was discovered. This would make the Clichy bones approximately 330,000 years old. The depth at which the Clichy human fossils were found, 7 feet, argues against recent burial. That's pretty deep to bury someone. But Gabriel de Mortillet said that the workmen at the quarry on the Avenue de Clichy told him that he had stashed the skeleton in the pit. Even after hearing de Mortillet relate the workman's story about stashing the bones of the Clichy skeleton, a number of scientists remained convinced Bertrand's discovery was genuine. For example, Professor E.T. Hamey said, "Mr. Bertrand's discovery seems to me to be so much less debatable in that it is not the first of its kind at the Avenue de Clichy. Indeed, our esteemed colleague, Mr. Rubaud, found in that same locality and almost at the same depth, 4.2 meters, human bones that he has given me to study." So it's not a singular event. Keith reported that initially almost all authorities in France believed that the Clichy skeleton was as old as the layer in which Bertrand said it was found. Later, after accepting the Neanderthals as the Pleistocene ancestors of modern humans, French anthropologists dropped the Clichy skeleton, which predated the Neanderthals, from the list of bona fide discoveries. A representative of the modern human type should not have been existing before his supposed ancestors. The Neanderthals are thought to have existed from 30,000 to 150,000 years ago, but the Clichy skeleton would be over 300,000 years old. We know now that Neanderthals and modern humans were coexisting. Mm-hmm. And it is quite possible that anatomically modern people predated the rise of the Neanderthals. They might have gone back in time for a long time together, coexisting. Well, yeah, but we coexist with chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans today.
That's right.
For argument's sake. But Neanderthals, exactly. But Neanderthals are not our ancestors. They are our human contemporaries. Right. We interbred with them, right? So they're not that. In his remarks to the Anthropological Society, Bertrand provided additional evidence for the great antiquity of the Clichy skeleton. He stated that he found a human ulna in the stratum containing the other bones of the Clichy human skeleton. The ulna is the larger of the two long bones of the forearm. When Bertrand tried to extract the ulna, it crumbled into dust. He offered this as proof that the Clichy human skeleton must have been native to the layer in which it was found. Apparently, Bertrand reasoned, that a bone as fragile as the decayed ulna could not possibly have been removed from the upper layer of the quarry and stashed by a workman in the lower layer in which Bertrand found it. It would certainly have been destroyed in the process. This indicated that the ulna belonged to the stratum in which Bertrand found it, as did the other human bones.
Wow. Well, you know, it says a lot about how a forgery or a deception could have been portrayed and or not portrayed, and I have to leave that up to the audience to make your mind up. Clearly, I think I know where I stand on this. La Denis skull fragments. I'm going to get hate mail, and I apologise.
No, you won't.
Yeah,
You're doing
I
good
do.
job.
In the 1840s, pieces of human bone were discovered in the midst of a volcanic strata at La Denis, France. Of particular interest was the frontal bone of the human skull. Sir Arthur Keith stated that the frontal differs in no essential particular from the frontal bone of a modern skull. The frontal was taken from sediments deposited between two layers of lava. The first lava layer was from the Pliocene and the last from the late Pleistocene. The skull bone, thus, could be either a few thousand years or as many as 2 million years old. The bone was found to have about the same nitrogen and fluorine content as bones from the late Pleistocene sites elsewhere in France. But such comparisons are not of much value, as we've heard earlier, because of the content of nitrogen or fluorine in the bones depends heavily on the sediment type, temperature, and water flow, which can vary greatly from place to place. The true age of the La Denis frontal remains unknown, but because there is no reason to believe it could be as old as 2 million, we have included it here.
The Ipswich skeleton. In 1911, J. Reed Moore discovered an anatomically modern human skeleton beneath a layer of glacial boulder clay near the town of Ipswich in the East Anglia region of England. Reading through various secondary accounts, we learned that J. Reed, that's the authors, J. Reed Moore later changed his mind about the skeleton, declaring it recent. We thus did not consider the Ipswich skeleton for the inclusion in the book. But after further investigation, the authors determined that the Ipswich skeleton could be genuinely old. The skeleton was found at a depth of 1.38 meters, 4.5 feet, between a layer of boulder clay and some underlying glacial sands. These deposits could be as much as 400,000 years old. Moore was aware of the possibility that the skeleton might represent a recent burial. Therefore, he carefully verified the unbroken and undisturbed nature of the strata in and under which the skeleton lay. As for the condition of the bones, Sir Arthur Keith said it was similar to that of Pleistocene animal fossil found elsewhere in the glacial sands. The discovery, however, inspired intense opposition. Keith wrote that if the skeleton had been as primitive as Neanderthal man, no one would have doubted it was as old as the boulder clay. Under the presumption that the modern type of man is also modern in origin, he stated a degree of high antiquity is denied to such specimens. You know, so if it doesn't fit, then it clearly can't fit. It doesn't. Yeah. Anyway, despite opposition, Moyer initially stuck to his guns, holding that the Ipswich skeleton was genuinely old. What then happened to change his mind is the question, right? So what happened was this: he found nearby, at the same level, some stone tools resembling those from the this is tough for me as well. Aurignacian period, considered to be about 30,000 years old. He concluded that the layer of boulder clay above the skeleton had been formed at that time from the sludge-like remnants of the original boulder clay deposit, formed hundreds of thousands of years earlier. In Moyer's statement, we find nothing that compels us to accept a recent age of 30,000 years for the skeleton. Sophisticated stone tools, comparable to those of the Onion in Europe, turn up all over the world, in very distant times. In the 1960s, such implements were discovered at Huaytlaco in Mexico in strata yielding a uranium series age of over 200,000 years. During the 19th century, very advanced stone objects turned up in the California gold mines in gravels that might be as old as the Eocene. Therefore, we cannot agree with Moyer that the discovery of tools of advanced type at the same level as the Ipswich skeleton was sufficient reason to reinterpret the site stratigraphy to bring the age of the skeleton into harmony with the supposed age of the tools. Also, Moyer gave no geological reasons whatsoever in support of his conclusion that the boulder clay was a recently deposited sludge. Therefore, the simplest hypothesis is that it was really a layer of intact glacial boulder clay, as originally reported by Moyer and recorded by the British Geological Survey on its detailed map of the region. The glacial sands in which the Ipswich skeleton was found must have been laid down between the onset of the Anglican glaciation, about 400,000 years ago, and onset of the Hoxnean interglacial, about 330,000 years ago. It would thus appear that the Ipswich skeleton is between 330 and 400,000 years old. Some authorities put the onset of the Mindel glaciation, equivalent to the Anglian, at about 600,000 years, which would give the Ipswich skeleton an age potentially that great. Yet human beings of modern type are not thought to have appeared in Western Europe before 30,000 years ago.
Terra Amata. The Terra Amata site is located on the Mediterranean coast of southern France. There, in the late 1960s, French anthropologist Henri de Lumley, I'm sorry, I apologise, found oval patterns of post holes and stone circles indicating that hominids erected temporary shelters and built fires about 400,000 years ago. Also found were bone tools. Among them was one apparently used as an awl, A-W-L, perhaps to sew skins. Impressions found in the old land surface at the site were said to demonstrate that the hominids slept or sat on hides. Stone implements were also found, including an object described as a projectile point, made from volcanic rock obtained from Estoril region 30 miles away. Significantly, no hominid fossils were found at Terra Amata. In his 1969 article about Terra Amata discoveries published in Scientific American, de Lumley did, however, report the imprint of a right foot, 9.5 inches long, preserved in the sand of a dune. De Lumley did not identify the type of hominid that made the print, but judged from the available reports, the footprint is not different from that of an anatomically modern human being. This print tends to strengthen the skeletal evidence from the Middle Pleistocene sites we have just discussed. Anytime you're unmuting, Mickey.
And so I should. The Buenos Aires skull, a very strong case for anatomically modern humans existing in very early times, comes from Argentina. In 1896, workers excavating a dry dock in Buenos Aires found a human skull. Again, workers excavating. It's always it's accidents, right? It's completely coincidental.
They're not playing gigs.
Yeah, that's right. So they found a human skull. They took it from the rudder pit at the bottom of the excavation, after breaking through a layer of a hard limestone-like substance called Tosca. The level at which the skull was found was 11 meters, about 36 feet below the bed of the River La Plata. The workers who found the skull gave it to Mr. Juno, their supervisor, a senior member of the Public Works Division of the Port of Buenos Aires. Information about the skull was furnished to the Argentine paleontologist Florentino Amgehino by Mr. Edward Marsh Simpson, an engineer for the company contracted to excavate the port of Buenos Aires. In the opinion of Amgehino, the skull removed from the rudder pit belonged to a Pliocene precursor of Homo sapiens. He called the precursor Diprothonio platensis, but according to Alice Hrdlicka of the Smithsonian Institution, this skull was just like that of a modern human. Again, Mr. Alex Redlica. The skull was found in what Ales Redlica called the uppermost portion of the pre-Encinedian stratum. According to modern geological opinion, the pre-Encinedian stratum should be at least 1 to 1.5 million years old. Even at 1 million years, the presence of a fully modern human skull anywhere in the world, what to speak of South America, would be unexpected. Mr. J. Clark, the foreman and the workers who found the skull, said he was quite sure the skull was found at the Rudder Pit and under Tosca, which was the layer of rock. Bailey Willis, the geologist who accompanied Redlica on his expedition to Argentina, interviewed Mr. June and reported, the fragment of skull was taken out of the well, the Rudder Pit, and although this statement rests on the say-so of the foreman, who was told so by a workman, it appears to be the one item in the early history of the find that is not open to serious doubt. Willis went on to offer some vague, unfounded speculations about how the skull could have arrived in that position. For his part, Redlica thought the fact the skull was modern in shape was enough to rule out any great age for it. Redlica's prejudice is evident in the following statement from his 1912 book, The Antiquity, this is the statement now, the antiquity, therefore, of any human skeletal remains which do not present marked differences from those of modern man may be regarded, on morphologic grounds, as only insignificant geologically, not reaching in time in all probability beyond the modern, still unfinished geological formations. So, just very quickly, what he means by that is, it doesn't matter what it looks like, if it's found in the wrong strata, it can't be what it is. Here we have a very clear formulation of the dubious principle of dating by morphology. So this is the circular argument we just have to explain just 1 second. We know that human beings have been around for 100,000 years, full stop. How we know that? Well, we just know that, so shut up. So therefore, anything that looks modern but was found in an really old layer, though, cannot be possibly that old. Because we've already told you that human beings have been around for 100,000 years. So we can't possibly find them in any other layer, because we already know that human beings are 100,000 years old. That's a bit of a circular argument.
So sometimes that argument means you can't look anywhere else because we're not going to agree with it.
No, because it doesn't follow the morphology that we have accepted. It clearly is impossible, because we know that we are right and you're wrong. Well, we know that you're wrong. Okay, because we've proven now, well, science has proven, and this will happen more and more. I mean, eventually, as people are dying, this is horrible to say, but as people are dying, and new opinions can come to the fore, we will uncover more and more things. Okay, people that haven't got a vested interest in the existing story. Okay, people that haven't been indoctrinated and have to follow dogma. As more and more of that happens, we will get more and more, hopefully, scientific objectivism. Dave?
Oh, I completely agree. And I'm thinking that 3 minutes is not enough.
Oh, no, it's not. No, but look, the point of this is really to highlight the research that Cremo and Thompson have undertaken and shared with you, and to cast at least doubt on the official story. Okay? Because, I mean, there's so many things. We've given you the physical evidence of the buildings, there's stories still in mythology and existence. There's physical evidence as well. I mean, okay, now there's physical biological evidence. And again, like I said earlier at the beginning of this, why did they only find it then? Why not anymore? Because the way we mine has changed. The way we generally work in the earth has changed. Right? And it will change more and more.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So, Meki, because we found tons and tons of, well, not tons, we found a numerous amount of fossils within the 100,000 year range. And that solidifies that. That's fine. No argument. It just, we really didn't look deeper than that. We didn't expect to go back that far. And now that we're finding things that do go back that far and are dated back that far, and that it doesn't fit the timeline that was originally proposed, fine. They should, this lockstep thing where they can't agree unless everyone agrees, and then they can only make one tiny little step and then have to confront the next piece of evidence, is totally ludicrous, in that it seems like there's more than enough evidence to go forward, but because of this, we discussed this tenure, there's grants, there's people who have put their entire career based on, not put it, but created their career based on the current way of thinking, they can't suddenly change it. So we've got the time frames we're looking here for an acceptance is when they all move on and they no longer have a voice to argue against it. Isn't that crazy?
It's human nature, right? I mean, look at how glacial the change is in other things. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. The Bible wasn't translated into a living language, a modern language until Martin Luther. He translated into German. Then James, he translated English, and then others followed suit. But unless you were a man of letters back in the day, or even part of the church, you had no idea what the Bible said. It was in Latin, it was in ancient Greek, and that was that. But that changed over time, right? And as people died and then as institutions reformed, or maybe people should know what they're praying for. Maybe we should tell them what it's all about. And education is a recent thing as well. People never ask questions. Oh, there's the music. Guys, donate if you can. This is Listener Fun. And Jer Bear is coming up with an awesome show, I'm sure.
As he always does. Take care and have a great week. Try and stay virus-free, and we'll catch you next week for another Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mackie. Take care, everyone.